Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. So in I think it was my last video, the Harlequin Rasbora tank, I briefly mentioned cycling your aquarium and how I was going to do a video on cycling your aquarium. But I realised that before I do that, I should probably talk to you about the nitrogen cycle. So here it is. So the nitrogen cycle is a biological process in which ammonia in our fish tanks is converted to nitrite and converted to nitrate. It's a process which has to happen, and it's a process which requires bacteria in order to happen. And the simple fact of the matter is without establishing the nitrogen cycle within our aquariums, our fish are going to die. They're not going to survive. We need a way of managing the waste in our aquariums and how it gets broken down. Now there's three things really that ultimately are going to break down that waste. The first one, and the most important one, is bacteria. The second one is live plants, and in all of my aquariums you'll see that I do use live plants, and there's a very good reason for that, but I'll get back to that. And the third one is you, at the end of the day, and how often you maintain your aquariums, how often you do water changes. So we are just as integral to the process as your bacteria is, but your bacteria is going to be the most important part of this. So the first part of the nitrogen cycle is when ammonia enters our aquarium, and it gets there through fish poo, fish pee, and through fish breathing, and they excrete ammonia from their gills. In fact, the most amount of ammonia which will come from the fish is through them effectively breathing. That's how most ammonia gets into our aquariums, which is why it can build up quite fast. So as soon as ammonia develops or appears within our aquariums, a bacteria is going to start building up, which is going to consume that ammonia, and that is the first part of the bacteria which enters our aquarium. Now, it can develop naturally, or you can use a bottled bacteria product to introduce that into your aquarium, and I use Seachem Stability. Now, other brands are available, but this is the one I like to use. So once the ammonia has been growing and building up in your aquarium, this bacteria is going to grow and going to start consuming that as food. Once it does that, it's going to convert this into another chemical called nitrite. Now both ammonia and nitrite are both very toxic to fish. So once the nitrite starts to build in your aquarium, another bacteria is going to start to grow and consume that as food, and then it's going to convert that into nitrate. Now nitrate is safe for fish in low amounts. In larger amounts it could still be toxic, but there's ways that we can manage that, and I'll come back to that as well. So how do we know when an aquarium has cycled or completed the nitrogen cycle? Well, we know this when we see zero ammonia, zero nitrite, and some nitrates. But those nitrates are going to continue to build up over time, and we still are going to have to manage those nitrates because, as I said before, ultimately when those nitrates build to certain levels, they can still be toxic to fish and you can have all sorts of problems. So there's three ways that you can deal with nitrates. The first one is you can put something in your filter which is going to remove the nitrates. That's not one I like to use, but there are products out there. I really don't recommend that. And then there's two other ways that we can do it. So the main one is using live plants. Now, I use live plants in all of my aquariums. I would urge everybody to do the same thing. And live plants consume nitrate as a form of food. Again, in natural waterways, live plants are going to be there as well as the bacteria. So together, they're going to be managing that waste that's in those waterways. And the other way is we remove nitrates through water changes. Now, I'm not saying that if you use live plants, you never have to do water changes. But what I am saying is that if we can get some help in how to maintain our aquariums, then why not? And it's going to reduce how often you have to do those water changes. If you don't use live plants, you might have to do water changes every week, especially if you've got a lot of fish in your aquarium. If you've got live plants in there, you might be able to change that water every 2 weeks. So you're still going to have to change the water. There's always a certain amount of involvement from us. But live plants are going to give you a really big help with that. And yeah, really, that's all there is to it. The nitrogen cycle is not really complicated. We could go into a lot more detail and depth about it. But the reality is that it's just a process. It's just a way of explaining the process of how waste is broken down in our aquarium. So we take ammonia, which comes from the fish, or uneaten food. That gets converted to nitrite. Ammonia and nitrite are toxic to fish, which then gets converted to nitrate, and we consume the nitrate by doing water changes and by using live plants to consume that nitrate as a food source. We know our tanks are cycled or have completed the nitrogen cycle when we use a test kit, which I use this one, which is the API Freshwater Master Test Kit. There's other ones available. This is the one I like to use. So when we see a reading of 0 ammonia, 0 nitrite, and some nitrates, we can assume that our aquarium is cycled, or at least cycling. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because your tank is never really cycled. You'll hear a lot of people say, my tank's cycled. Well, it's a constant process. I like to call it cycling. It means it's a continuous process, that waste is entering the aquarium, it's being broken down and broken down again. It's a continuous process. Now, unfortunately, through either fault of our own or no fault of our own, that process can be disrupted, because when we build up the bacteria in our aquariums, that bacteria will only grow to how much bioload your aquarium has, or how much waste your aquarium has. If we introduce too much waste, or if we disturb that bacteria in any way, then it can cause problems, and you may have to go through the process again to some degree. And this is the same in natural waterways as well. In natural waterways, some chemicals could get into, rivers and oceans, and that can disrupt the balance as well. So it's always something to bear in mind, that your aquarium needs to go through the nitrogen cycle first, but you also have to routinely check using test kits to make sure that it's still working, and make adjustments and make changes if for any reason it gets disturbed. That's pretty much the most basic explanation of the nitrogen cycle. We don't really need to go into loads of detail about it. There's lots of videos on YouTube that go into the actual scientifics of it. It's not really important, to be honest. You don't need to know to that degree. All you need to know as a hobbyist is that you need to do it in order to establish your fish tank for the health of your fish, really, and for the longevity of your aquariums. It's the number one reason why a lot of people leave the hobby, because they buy an aquarium, they set it up, they put loads of fish in it, and then they die, and they don't know why they've died. They believe they've done everything correct, and the truth of the matter is that they didn't do the nitrogen cycle, or they didn't understand the nitrogen cycle. And when you do that and you understand that process, you're going to have a much easier time at keeping wonderful fish like we've got. So thank you for watching the video. Watch out for the next one on how to cycle your aquarium, where I'll go into more detail about how I do it. Everybody does it different ways. There are lots and lots of YouTube videos where people all do it in different ways and all explain it in different ways. And of course, we're all different, but the way I do it might help somebody. So, that's why I'm doing these videos at the end of the day. You may like my way of doing it, you might not, and that's fine. But anyway, if you've enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like, consider subscribing if you're new, and drop any comments in the comment box, and I'll get back to you on those. So thanks again, guys, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.